A series of safety net scams in Minnesota have now resulted in federal charges against dozens of people, many from that state's Somali community, for a fraud total exceeding $1 billion, sparking a verbal tussle between President Trump and Minnesota's governor, Tim Walz.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We're joined today by my colleagues on the Journal's opinion pages, Matt Continetti and Kim Strassel. There have been dozens of charges now filed in this burgeoning fraud scheme involving more than one federal program, Medicaid, the Federal Child Nutrition Program in Minnesota. One source telling a newspaper no one was doing anything about the red flags. It was like someone was stealing money from the cookie jar and they kept refilling it. Naturally, President Trump is now sensing a political opportunity here for Republicans. Here he is addressing this series of schemes during a cabinet meeting this week.
But this beautiful place, and I see these people ripping it off. And now I'm understanding, and you're going to look at that's. I hear they ripped off Somalians, ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you. Okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care.
And here responding is Minnesota Governor and Kamala Harris's 2024 running mate, Tim Walz.
My message is simple on this. You commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to prison. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are. Anybody who wants to help us in that, we welcome that. But sitting on the sidelines and throwing out accusations, and let's be very clear, demonizing an entire population and lying to people about the safety and security of this state is beneath that.
Both of my esteemed colleagues today have written it now on this story. Matt, let me start with you, both because you are here in studio with us today for our viewers on YouTube, and also because your column under the headline, How Minnesota Became the Land of 10,000 Frauds, includes some good specifics on the allegations. So take us through what the prosecutors are saying happened here.
Well, it is a mind-blowing story, Kyle. There are 3 separate plots. 59 convictions so far, and all but 8 of the 86 individuals charged to date are of Somali descent. But what struck me reviewing the various Justice Department indictments and press releases was just how nasty some of this graft was. It starts with this Feeding Our Future program, which was meal assistance to poor children during the pandemic, which this halal grocery became the epicenter of a scam where they were submitting names for reimbursement of children who didn't exist. But then it goes to housing assistance for at-risk individuals for homelessness. So another group of perpetrators started saying that they were supplying funds and housing assistance to the tune of almost $100 million a budget for this program. And they were ripping off millions of that. And then finally, as if that weren't bad enough, autistic children. A third separate plot was basically defrauding the government. One individual leading a group of, including parents, who were submitting names of Somali American children who were not autistic, but saying to the federal government that they were qualified for care. So each of these indictments reads as a kind of just a textbook fraud case, but also the details and the nature of the aid that was being grifted here really adds, I think, a lot of weight to this already inflammatory scandal.
And in some cases, Kim, my understanding is that some of these parents who were claiming that their children qualified for this autistic care were then getting kickbacks. The Journal also has an editorial on this and says that the scammers in this Feeding Our Future scheme submitted names of people that they were allegedly feeding. They had these names that were swiped from a website called listofrandomnames.com, which is a particularly humorous angle here. Kim, your Friday column is also on this subject. What do you make of the just the complete apparent lack of financial controls on the money that is going out the door, taxpayer money that is going out the door. If there's, I mean, what are the checks that are being done that they can't detect random names that are taken off the internet?
Well, Kyle, I think this says everything about the deeper meaning of this story. And it's why what Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, had to say there is sort of a joke. He's making it sound as though, oh, we're all over this. We've been all over this. The reality is that most of the prosecutions have made clear that a lot of political figures did know that this was going on, or at least they had very good indication to believe it was. And a lot of things went wrong in terms of accountability. You had some political figures that appeared to be putting pressure on state agencies that were noting this because they didn't want the scandal to be exposed. You had other political figures that were wary about doing anything about indictments because the Somali community is a big source of votes out in the Minneapolis area. You had some of the groups themselves. This is interestingly a little bit of a tale of the toxicity of identity politics, in that some of these groups understood the power of arguing that they deserved these funds because they were minority-owned groups in the special dispensation that a lot of states will give to that category of nonprofits. And then when some officials threatened to ask questions and push back, they said that if they were hit by any of those pushbacks, that they would claim that they were being subject to racism, and therefore, managed to sort of get these officials to back off. So there's a lot that was going on there that was very ugly, and this could have been handled a lot sooner and possibly without as much bilking as happened. But the bigger problem here, Kyle, is just we have got at this point, what this shows, we now have an anti-poverty system, both at the federal level and the state level, that has become ridiculous. And we no longer have the ability to police it. It's broken. We have more than 80 major anti-poverty programs just at the federal government level. And those are big ones too, 80 big ones. You're talking about Medicaid and food stamps and LIHEAP and CHIP and TAMP and Head Start and Pell Grants and public housing and rental assistance. It just goes on. And then hundreds more that duplicate this or overlap at the state level. And I mean, forget just even the question of, we don't even basically verify people. We no longer have the ability to do it. We're so busy tossing money out the door and trying to stay ahead of the applications. People are double dipping. They're engaged in outright scams. I mean, if not of the fraudulent level that Matt was just describing, just the sort of run of the mill ones where you claim that you're separated from your husband and actually he's just having his mail sent to another house so that you can qualify for all these benefits. This is just happening right and left. And the problem is that as a result is our social safety net system has really just become an ATM for fraud and criminals. And as a result is not fulfilling its mission of identifying and then offering targeted assistance to those who truly need temporary assistance. There's no way it can manage that because it's too busy just bankrolling the crooks out there.
But that's part of the scandal to my mind, Matt, is, I mean, obviously what happened in Minnesota, this kind of intentional fraud, it ought to be prosecuted. But the broader system is vulnerable to this kind of thing all the time. And everybody in Washington knows it. I mean, that's just a basic fact of life. If you go look at the Medicaid program, the rate of improper payments is the term in 2024 was 5%. And by the way, that is down, if you can believe it, from something like 20% in COVID. And to be clear, improper payments is a broader term that does not mean all of that is intentional fraud, but it includes things like places where there is not documentation that is kept. They can't verify that they did the eligibility checks. And so the kinds of things that Kim is talking about slip through, people whose income is above the qualification for the program, for example. And maybe there's a view by some on the left that that's not a huge deal if people's income is above the cutoff line and they're still getting Medicaid or still getting some of these safety net programs. They're not so concerned about that. But you end up with a system in which 5% of the money going out the door can't be accounted for properly. And I think if you told the CEO that, if you told the CEO that 5% of their expenses last year they don't have receipts for, they would blow their stack and the whole accounting department would be out on the street the next day.
Right. I mean, the numbers are staggering. And in the case in Minnesota, there's more than $1 billion in fraud. There's one study that says that government assistance fraud cases are up 242% since the coronavirus pandemic. Last month, Florida Congresswoman Sheila Shafilus McCormick was charged with stealing $5 million in FEMA money and then giving it to her campaign. She denies those charges. So you can focus on these numbers because they are extraordinary and eye-opening. But what you're getting at, Kyle, is the broader moral dimension of our entitlement state. And that's why I think this story is so arresting, which is it kind of illustrates in detail this broader picture of dependency on government. The fact that just this year, between the debate over imposing work requirements on some Medicaid funds during the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and then the debate during the government shutdown about the SNAP program, and also the subsidies to people on the Obamacare exchanges, which now about 5% of all health insured individuals are on Obamacare. You have this kind of archipelago of welfare throughout the country. And yes, it invites fraud, but it also, I think, is insidious and kind of inculcates this feeling of dependence on government, learned helplessness. These are exactly the sorts of things that run against the American grain. And I would say that for Republicans looking for an agenda in 2026, they should refocus on welfare reform. That's been a big winner for them in the past.
Kim, what's your take on that broader picture? And to what extent is this an immigration story as President Trump is kind of trying to make it? And granted, he's doing a lot of stuff on immigration. And maybe part of the answer here is that he's trying to take pieces out of the news to justify changes to immigration policies, limitations on work permits and so forth, that the administration, many people inside it would probably want to do anyway.
Look, I can see why the president is seeking to turn this into an immigration story. There's been a lot of headlines in the last month or so coming out of these elections suggesting, and polling suggesting, independents are not thrilled at some of these broader immigration actions that we see happening across the country. And this is a tailor-made way for Donald Trump to say, well, see, this is an example of immigration gone wrong and a community ripping off the United States. And look, I think that there is some very interesting immigration elements and assimilation questions that do attend this story. There's been some focus on that Somali community and whether or not we as a country are doing enough these days to really create and maintain that melting pot that has always been so essential to the American immigrant experience. But look, this is the Republicans are missing a boat if they decide that they are going to make this all about immigration when it is just this flashing star out there that this is their opportunity to take Minnesota and use it, much as they used California to highlight the stupidity of a lot of green climate agenda. They should be taking Minnesota and saying, look, this is the world that Democrats want, this incredibly generous Scandinavia style cradle to grave entitlement safety net system financed by very high taxes. And look at what comes from it. As Matt was saying, not only a lot of social and moral problems, dependency and the loss of civic society, et cetera, that attend that kind of an environment. But also, we are just setting ourselves up for massive amounts of fraud, and the Republicans should be banging on about the importance and the wisdom of the provisions that they included in their One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which were a few, I think, beginner basic steps toward reining in some of this fraud, requiring a little bit more skin in the games from states in terms of the costs to try to encourage them to be more diligent about verifications. And some other provisions. But this is an opportunity to double down, to say, look, these programs have gone wildly off track from what they were intended to do. And we are not benefiting taxpayers, nor are we benefiting those who truly are in need, because the system is getting robbed 6 ways from Sunday. And that money is, going into the pockets of crooks. And it's too big and too unwieldy for us to manage. This is an opportunity for us to do a very big reset, to downside and resize these programs, to put a new emphasis on work requirements and temporary assistance, to maybe even try to reimagine some elements of government where you get rid of the duplications and you really make this a system that is more efficient and can better interact with state agencies to make sure that we are on guard for fraudsters. This is a very powerful message. Americans are very generous people as taxpayers too. They believe in a basic social safety net, but they don't like seeing this kind of dysfunction in government programs.
But Matt, how do you convince Republicans in Congress that they can win that argument? Because my recollection of the debate over the One Big Beautiful Bill is that that was not the piece of the bill that Republicans were shouting from the rooftops. It was, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. There was some partisan friction on those work requirements being put into those healthcare programs. And to be clear, I think Republicans can win that argument if they can get out in front of the public and make it and say, we think that able-bodied people who are of working age, who are getting taxpayer-subsidized insurance, should have some kind of work hours or volunteer hours, which was the basic of that reform, as I recall it. But it seems like many Republicans, lawmakers, politicians, are a little bit shy about sending that message.
They're shy. I think one of the reasons they're shy is the extent of the welfare system in the United States. I don't just mean direct assistance. I mean all the various programs we've been talking about during this program. And I think that there's the stigma that once attached to receiving welfare has now moved and is attached to even discussing people's dependency on government. There are some Republicans, like Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, who almost treat government benefits as a positive good and not something that should be actually seen as an indictment of our system, that people aren't working, that they're not able to provide for themselves. So I think what it takes is Republicans who have the courage to make clear distinctions between their belief in an opportunity society and social mobility in personal agency, and liberals who would rather have a government take care of us and lose our sense of responsibility in the process. We need more people who are able to draw those clear lines. And I would just add, too, this is a political story. Tim Walz is running for a third term as Minnesota's governor. That's pretty, unusual. And he is clearly on his back heels here. And so you can use if you're Republicans or conservatives in the 1,000 lakes or 10,000, how many lakes are in Minnesota?
There are a lot.
There are a lot, right. You can use the details of this scandal to have a broader attack on the welfare system that Tim Walz continues to defend, even though we see its manifold weaknesses.
Kim, in a similar vein, interesting story out of Washington this week. The Government Accountability Office has a report about it setting up fake accounts during the healthcare enrollment season. It said there were 24 fake accounts during 2024 and 2025 plan years, and that 22 slipped through, again, these kinds of checks to the extent that the checks exist. Fake accounts cost the government more than $10,000 per month in subsidies. Again, maybe part of the answer to my own question there is that events are moving the political argument around this in the Republican direction, because we've been having this ongoing debate about whether Republicans are going to extend these enhanced pandemic era Obamacare subsidies. Democrats say yes. Republicans, some of them seem divided. Kim, here's a pretty good argument that a lot of that money may not be going to where it is really intended.
This GAO report is totally worth a little bit of time reading, because it's actually almost hilarious. The story the GAO tells about it submitting its fake accounts. And literally at moments, it was like, are you sure you don't really want us to verify our eligibility? And the agents are like, nah, it's fine. So, I mean, and this was a plant, and it pretty clearly showed. But in addition to that, they came up with tens of thousands of other accounts that were double dipping, or that they couldn't verify. There's a whole bunch, a big raft of folks that are using social security numbers that appear to belong to deceased people. So the same sort of stuff that we were also seeing prevalent in healthcare programs and other unemployment insurance programs during the COVID period. But now it's clearly becoming, look, the word is out. Right? The word is out that if you want to bilk the government, there's a great big honeypot of money sitting there, and there's very little controls between you and obtaining it. And, I think that's part of what we saw. Now, what I don't understand on this healthcare thing is why Republicans are not making this report one of the biggest headlines of today. I mean, here they are in DC in the middle of negotiations with Democrats over what next to do over some of these Obamacare subsidies. And here is a report showing that this program is being fleeced. And I think if you're a Democrat, that's a very difficult position to maintain and say, yeah, government's getting ripped off right and left, but we should expand this and make it forever, and give it, throw even more money at it. And so this is another excellent opportunity for Republicans. I'll throw in one last, I think, silver lining out of this Minnesota story is the president at the moment is very much making this about immigration. But to your point before, Kyle, about Republican courage, one of the things that held them back a little bit in the One Big Beautiful Bill was this belief that Donald Trump would not really sign on to any serious restructuring of a lot of these programs. He'd be okay if you could talk about fraud, et cetera. But I think that this is maybe given the president a new perspective on just how bad and problematic a lot of these social safety net programs are. And if he were out helping to lead the charge, saying that we need to rethink this and downsize and reorient, that might make a big difference in terms of Republicans' ability to get it done.
Matt, we'll give you the last word today, but another line of the GAO report that I found pretty telling, it says that preliminary analyses identified over 29,000 Social Security numbers in plan year 2023 and nearly 68,000 Social Security numbers in plan year 2024 used to receive more than 1 year's worth of insurance coverage. And then it goes on to say that government officials explained that the federal marketplace does not prohibit multiple enrollments per SSN to help ensure the actual SSN holder can enroll in insurance coverage in cases of identity theft or data entry errors. So again, I don't quite understand the approach to fraud fighting here. If you have a flagged account, this Social Security number has already been enrolled in some kind of insurance plan. Well, we don't know if that was the fake account or if that was the real account, so let the other one go through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And of course, we got a preview of some of this with Doge earlier in the year, and they were uncovering instances of fraud as well. So it's really been just a panorama of welfare abuse. But I think the bottom line here is, we can police these individual cases, but if we really want to shrink the scope of the fraud, we need to shrink the government. We need to give the fraudsters less opportunity to cheat the system by simply spending less money. And guess what? We have a huge debt crisis that is coming down the pike as well, that this is connected to, not in the financial bill, but in the larger sense of a government that provides for your every need and invites criminals to take advantage of it. By shrinking the state and by emphasizing individual freedom and responsibility, we'll get past, I think, a lot of these scandals.
Thank you, Matt and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.